Yeah, my name is Tobias Federico. I'm a managing director of a company called Energy Brainpool. We are a consultancy and analysis company. Try to forecast anything which is around the energy market in total, energy prices, electricity prices, new tendencies in the energy market, whatsoever. And I'm happy to speak here today about blockchain IoT use cases in the energy sector. I had the pleasure to talk last time at the Ethereum Camp in Frankfurt, and I'm happy to talk here again in my hometown. So therefore, I'm here. I would like to give you an overview about what is happening around the blockchain itself in the energy sector, especially in combination with IoT. Mostly focusing on the electricity market. Of course, the energy sector has a huge bandwidth. We do have all the logistics around rough oil, and we do have all the gas questions, but I'm focusing on one of the most interesting commodities, for my opinion, in the energy market, which is then the electricity. Looking into what is happening there, I usually speak about in front of people who are around electricity trading. Telling them that there are certain tendencies in the market, technological developments, which might threaten their job in the future. And this is always fun when you speak about that, because if you tell a very well overpaid electricity trader that in 10 years his job will be done by a robot, whatever robot means, then they are really looking very, very sad, honestly. So that's our company. You can read that later on. Generally, I do start about, okay, we do have industry, the next industry revolution, which is Industry 4.0. I think it's nothing really I have to tell you right now here. But what's interesting about that, what type of jobs will be changed in the future? There was a market research study from the bank ING. Unfortunately, it's only in German. But literally it tells that jobs who are not very well paid or don't need a lot of education can be replaced with this industrial revolution by highly automatizing things, especially when you combine that with artificial intelligence. Starting by that and telling most of the participants that there always has been technological developments. Usually it happens in other people's garden, not in my front yard. But there are certain tendencies where you can see that it will happen also in the energy, especially in the electricity sector. And that's what I wanted to show you now. Usually I start with that. When you trade electricity, the interesting part of trading electricity is that you don't trade electricity. I don't know if you're familiar with electricity. Electricity is not storable. So how can you trade stuff which is not storable? Well, it's quite easy. You don't trade electricity, you trade trust. Because somebody gives you a promise. So you must trust him that he is able to fulfill this promise. And one promise is, I will produce electricity at a certain time in the future. And you, by that promise, give him money, so you promise him to pay money, but you also promise him to consume electricity in the same time frame. That's the rules how electricity trading is working. Before the market has been liberalized, we had monopolies, and there was this big, very powerful company who then started to produce electricity when they saw that there was a certain consumption. That's it. But now it has been split up. We have a liberalized market. You can produce electricity. You can sell the electricity / the promise to somebody else. And you do this always forefront. You don't do it instantaneously. You do it forefront. And why is it that you really trade electricity before the delivery? Well, the electricity supply is very sensitive in supply and demand. If we do have a deviation there, then we might face a blackout. Well, the deviation must be very big. And 2 days ago in my home street here in Berlin, I had a blackout. It was just a little area, but it was the area where the Ministry of Defense was, where a hotel was. So a blackout in that area is not really very funny. Well, the Ministry of Defense has a backup, which is a known power plant. But usually normal people don't have backups. So that happens if we don't match supply and demand. And somebody is responsible for that. That's the grid operator. So the grid operator always has to check whether supply and demand is in balance, and he has backup power plants. Checking supply and demand means for him that he cannot measure every producer. That's impossible right now, maybe with IoT later on, with Industry 4.0. But today, they are measuring the grid frequency. And if the grid frequency deviates from 50 hertz, then obviously that's a deviation, and with that deviation, something has happened. You can see if the grid frequency drops, obviously power plant is missing. If the grid frequency increases, obviously we have additional demander. That's easy. If you do have additional demander, you just shut down a few power plants. But if a power plant is missing, you cannot switch on additional demanders, as it is for today. But maybe in the future, with trading flexibility and acting with flexibilities, we can also switch on additional demanders to cover a deviation in the production. So this is the electricity supply in total. We will come to that later on. But when we start trading, the grid operator has to check whether everything is in balance. And he wants to do this also before the delivery, not only measuring the 50 hertz, but also before delivery. That's why we started electricity trading in the liberalized electricity market, where we are going to trade a promise again. So those electricity traders, they make their trades, and they have to deliver their trades to the grid operator to tell them, well, listen, somebody's producing, somebody's consuming, and the grid operator checks beforehand whether supply and demand, at least from the forecast, that's important, are in balance. And if the forecast is wrong, obviously there's a deviation, and then we again have the supply and demand deviation and correction from the grid operator. Suddenly we had electricity trading there. So we had the typical traders and trading behavior. And I don't know whether you're familiar with trading. Trading has a certain history, and it's quite interesting if you look back how you do trade commodities, assets on exchanges. Of course, it was a people's business in the beginning, and this is a screenshot from 1929, where you had those traders. Those people really are traders in a suit, obviously, and they have strange hand movements, which are signs to sell and buy stuff. So it was a lot of movement, and you had a lot of very interesting also crowd behavior. Suddenly, if more than two people look into one direction, you see, okay, something is happening there, and you run to this trading desk, and this trading desk was representing one stock. So obviously, if you had to run on one stock, obviously something was happening, either you want to sell or to buy, and then you had very interesting behavior, people's behavior. Today's electricity, and this lasted until the 90s, mid-90s. Today's electricity trading is electronic trading. So you trade electricity electronically via computers, and the typical trader usually doesn't wear suits anymore, and secondly, don't need their hands anymore, they're doing it on a computer. So they have their screen, their trading screen, and this is the trading floor of RWE, so one of the big German electricity producers. In this room, this is one big room, they have 330 traders, or at least, honestly, they have 330 people sitting there. Half of them are traders, and the other part are IT guys, checking whether the computer connection is right, programming sometimes some interesting routines, but half of this trading desk is really IT today, as it is today. And what's interesting, they have separated in different commodities. For example, this is the gas trading desk, this is the oil trading desk, then here you have the electricity, maybe here the CO2 certificates. So different commodities around the energy market. And again, here we do have interesting behavior. If somebody's screaming, oh no, it's really, really interesting to watch. Everybody's looking up, so what's happening there? Oh, that's the CO2 desk. What has happened in the CO2 market? And this might affect my market too. So there you have interesting price correlations. Telling them that, and they say, well, that's state of the art, and it is, but I tell them you are overpaid, and in the future you will have the new electricity trader, which is this one here. Yeah? I just took the Arctic, whether it's this one or a different one, but just telling them we have Industry 4.0 combined with different other stuff. One is we have much more information. We do have the Internet of Things, and we have cloud solutions. And what you are doing are two things. One is just the operational trading. Somebody wants to buy electricity, you click the mouse button and you buy the electricity in the same moment. Easy. Yeah? So you have an external information, you have a trigger information, and you trade that. The second part is prop trading, speculative trading. Speculative trading is interesting because here usually you don't trade facts, you trade rumors. And putting rumors into something which is Industry 4.0, into an algorithm, could become quite interesting, but I think it's a challenge as it is for today, maybe in the future not. So a typical trader trades facts and rumors. Those facts can be replaced by an algorithm. You have an external input parameter and then suddenly you trade. Rumors, again, might be difficult. Why is it really necessary, or why is it so easy to replace a trader with that one? Well, the electricity market has changed. Again, I told you we are trading promises, depending on the forecast of supply and demand. But most of the forecast of producing electricity, as it is for today, comes from conventional power plants, but 1/3 in Germany, for example, comes from renewable power plants, which is fluctuating renewables usually, which is PV panels, solar panels, and which is wind energy. They are quite difficult to forecast in the long run. Long run for me is 10 days and longer. It's impossible to forecast them for 10 days. And even for the next 3 days, it's not so easy to forecast them. You have a quite high reliability for the next 10, 15 minutes to forecast the whole electricity feed and of all the wind farms in Germany for the whole system. But trading usually happens in a longer period, year ahead, month ahead, or also day ahead and intraday. And those intraday trading volumes have increased over the past because we have so much fluctuating renewables. In this case, you have also traders sitting there 24/7 on their trading desk waiting that the forecast was wrong, and then they start trading. And it's really stupid, as it is for today with today's technology, to have a highly paid trader sitting there the whole day and the whole night. So as it is for today, they are already starting to replace those traders by algorithms. And those algorithms have an external input parameter, which are fundamental input parameters, which is the expected solar feed-in or the deviation of the forecast. And then they start trading. So buy if the prices are cheaper, or sell if the prices are higher. And if we have a deviation, you must follow your forecast. So please buy the deviation. Usually, it's not happening on the device as it is for today. Most of the algo traders are in the cloud, and they have a connection directly to the electricity exchanges. The electricity exchange has an API, so you can start trading there. But this is one of the first sectors, as one example, where I do see that IoT will take place. Measuring those PV panels and wind farms and doing some informations with that. Also, the next step, maybe starting to trade. But the topic wasn't IoT and the energy use cases. It was also blockchain and energy use cases. Looking into the blockchain, I was following the blockchain since 4 years, mostly for the electricity market. I tried to draw a small sketch about what I do see within the blockchain. Usually, we have the device. This could be a power plant. This could be an electricity consumer, whatsoever. There you have an IoT device, and you have a software running on that. Coming from wholesale, so big-scale power plants, Siemens and so on, they have the SCADA system, and that's it. So they're measuring stuff of those big power plants. They usually send those informations to the internal database. In this case, it could be a blockchain. And you could run on that different things. You can run machine learning on that, artificial intelligence. You can run forecasts on that, predictive maintenance, whatsoever. That's an algorithm within the cloud. And it gives you additional information, either for new data or new transactions, for example, trading. So please trade my deviation. Or you can then trigger information back to the device. For a big wind farm, for example, please change your pitch so that we will produce more or less electricity. Or for electricity consumer, it could be interesting to increase the demand or decrease the demand. We have the visualization. Later on, for my personal opinion, that is not necessary anymore because we will have machine-to-machine communication. So the visualization is just for those who are managing it or for real people. Yeah. What becomes much more interesting in the future is becoming more information from data and transactions from third parties. For example, weather forecast, weather deviations, or trades from other people, or trading rumors, whatsoever. Yeah? Here, I do see the blockchain becomes quite interesting. In this example, it's only a database, but the blockchain has much higher potential, especially when we look into the tokenization issues. Starting with that, 2 years ago, several startups have initiated ideas, use cases to be developed within the electricity sector. And one big problem in the electricity sector, at least in Germany, is at the consumer level, how do you measure things? Yeah? Germany is not really advanced in that field. We do have the European law to integrate smart meters in 80% of the households within Europe until 2030. I'm not sure whether this is the right date. But as it is for today, most of you, when you're in Germany, have those type of meters. So very manual, you have to go down there once a year, read it out, send it to your electricity supplier, and that's it. They are just accumulating the electricity demand, but you don't have a profile. You don't know what's happening in this time slice where maybe your solar panel is producing. If you are a bit more advanced, you have this version digital. Yeah? And most of the startups, when they are working in a household sector and try to measure the electricity consumption, they are working with this upper level here. Yeah? In the future, we will have the so-called intelligent meters with a smart meter gateway, but as it is for today, we have this type of technology there. So if you want to start a business case and scale it up with German households, you have to invest into hardware. And one supplier sells you this for 100 euro a year. The problem is that the electricity trading volumes in households usually are much smaller, that 100 euro a year cuts all your margins. So you have an interesting use case, but you won't have a business case. No? Nevertheless, in the electricity sector, in combination with blockchain, we have a lot of startups coming up. We have a lot of use cases and some business cases. The big change in the electricity market was that people, households, are able to produce their own electricity. Usually not at a very high level of security of supply. That's why they still have the public grid connection. But a consumer is becoming a prosumer. So the typical electricity supply chain, you produce electricity at very big power plants. You have the transmission grid, you have the electricity sales, and you have the consumption at the households. It's not a chain, it becomes a circle. Because suddenly, households can produce their own electricity at the place of the consumption. That's really new. The traditional business was production side, then we had the trading side, the sales side, and at the meter was stop. They didn't, electricity suppliers don't have a clue what's happening behind the meter. That's their customer, it's the measurement point. But what's happening beyond the meter, they don't have an idea. Around that, we already have some interesting areas where I do see some blockchain potentials and where we do have some use cases in the electricity market. On the production side, we do have the SCADA data. Those are the big power plants with all the information. They are collected at the owner of the power plants, and that's a data treasure. Usually you can really dig it out and work with those data. Unfortunately, they don't do it. But it is really a data treasure. We do have the controlling part, especially in combination with the trading. We do have the reporting part, so report what trades have been happening. The scheduling part, EV charging becomes quite interesting. Market communication, that's a special topic. When you change your electricity suppliers, the old electricity supplier has been informed, the new one has to be informed, the grid operator has to be informed. So it's a huge process, and that's market communication. They still do it via Excel, which is state-of-the-art technology in the electricity sector. So, and then we do have the billing and accounting. Becomes very interesting with blockchain, no? The trust level, the payment. Here I see quite some potentials. And suddenly on this prosumer part, we have the peer-to-peer trading. When I'm producing electricity and the sun is shining and my consumption is little in this moment, what do I do with the surplus electricity? I sell it to the public grid. The payment of the public grid is very little. Why can't I really sell it to my neighbor or to somebody else? So peer-to-peer trading becomes interesting. But in this case, we have to deal with the measurement, who's consuming what in what time, who's paying whom, and suddenly the blockchain comes into place. And we have a quite interesting development right now in Germany with is the auto consumption. In some other countries, it's not allowed by law, but in Germany, when you buy a PV panel today, you usually buy it with a battery. With a lithium-ion battery, so you have your whole package, and you can store a certain amount of electricity. You cannot store your full electricity which you are consuming over the year, but at least 80% can be stored in this combination. So you have suddenly an overcapacity of PV panels when they're producing. You might have an overcapacity within your battery. Suddenly you can sell from two devices. You can sell from the battery and you can sell from the PV panel, depending on the state of load of your battery. Especially in that sector, I do quite see some interesting combinations with smart home applications. Why can't I increase my electricity demand at home when my battery is full? Maybe cooling my fridge a little bit lower, or maybe pumping water up and down if necessary, not pumping it down, but pumping it up. But we have a general tendency, which is the sharing economy. Is it really necessary to own a PV panel? Or can I rent it out? Can I rent the electricity out? If I rent it out, and when I rent it out, how do I manage the payment? And whom do I trust? And how can I secure the electricity of supply? So who's trading the deviation? And suddenly my Arctic comes into place, who might trade the electricity on the big electricity exchange. We have some interesting developments there because suddenly in the electricity market, regional markets are starting. So where you have small-scale electricity markets, which is just one little neighborhood, and they do exchange electricity as if it would be on a wholesale market. Sharing economy only works when we have overcapacities. Car sharing is quite famous for that, and a car is an overcapacity. When you calculate your full consumption hours of a car, how many hours a year are you really driving in that car? It's only 400. Of 8,760s. So 5% of the whole time a year you are using your car. And 95% of the whole year the car's just standing there. So it's an overcapacity. So you can share it with others. A battery and a PV panel, if we have a lot of sun and if we have overcapacities there, it's really an if and not a when, then we come to the point that we might share that. Yeah? So sharing economy is a quite interesting tendency there. And also the smart meters, so those intelligent meters I've shown you, you could develop smart meters there. And there's a very interesting use case, which is also a business case in South Africa. There's a company called Ban Ki-moon. It's a really funny name, but it's the real name, from Lorian Gamarov. And he has developed a Bitcoin prepaid smart meter. Usually a problem in South Africa is, or in whole sub-Sahara Africa, that the payment. So how do you really get cash and how do you pay your electricity? And using Bitcoin or M-Pesa or whatever payment system you have down there, using this as a prepaid smart meter, it's really intelligent. And it was his idea, and he started with that, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. And he's connecting schools for donations. So schools have a smart meter from the electricity supplier, and he has connected in his cloud the smart meter from the electricity supplier with a Bitcoin account. And if you want to make a donation, you just pay some Bitcoins on a Bitcoin account, and he's converting that into electricity, so suddenly the school has light and can use electricity. So a prepaid smart meter using blockchain and cryptocurrencies, not Bitcoin at all, but blockchain and cryptocurrency, is a quite interesting use case, and he's scaling up now, so it's also a business case in that area. Especially in the peer-to-peer trading, we have seen a lot of startups. By law in Germany, for example, you can't really do peer-to-peer trading because you must be an official electricity supplier. But some electricity suppliers are dealing with that. So if the prosumer and the consumer are within the same electricity supplier, he can manage those volumes. And they're doing it. There are some startups. One is Hyperledger, and the other one is PowerPeers. PowerPeers is in the Netherlands from Nuon. And here really neighbors share their electricity over the local electricity supplier. And they're thinking now about using Hyperledger, for example, to manage the matching and not managing the payment right now. Payment not yet, but maybe later on. We have all those peer-to-peer startups, Conjule, Transactive Grid, Grid Plus in Texas, where they really make, and it's based all on the public Ethereum blockchain, where they manage electricity supply and also the payment via this. Grid Plus has quite higher ambitions. They really want to have the central gateway to pay also your pizza with cryptocurrencies. Actually, you can do that in Germany. with Lieferando here in Berlin. And I once ordered my pizza and paid with Bitcoins. Unfortunately, I had to pay more because the payer at Bitcoin has to pay the transaction fee. It was quite high in that time. Secondly, it was that I had to wait the 3 blocks until my transaction has been verified, which took half an hour plus 1.5 hours of the pizza delivery, and it took a long time. So it's not really practical as it is for today, but as you know, blockchain technologies are changing over time. What we also have within the sharing economy with the batteries, there's a company called Sonnen. And in Germany, they are combining PV batteries, PV and solar panels, the batteries, in a swarm, and give the whole swarm to the grid supplier to manage the grid deviation in case of any forecasting deviation. So you can do that technically, but with the accounting part, it becomes a bit more complicated. Because with the accounting part, you must know which peers have been available, at what capacities did they really supply, and you must manage the micropayment. But using the blockchain technology, and I think in this case it's also Ethereum, it becomes quite interesting. On the smart home application, where fridges are trading with PV panels, we have in Germany a law which is called Mieterstrom, where really neighbors can trade with each other within one house. And we have an initiative which is from Grid Singularity. This is the blockchain startup which is also starting the Energy Web Foundation, where they, together with Gavin Wood from the Ethereum and Parity, they are now developing a new blockchain which is made only for the electricity market. I think it's called Tobalala. They have those strange names, those developers from some metro stations all over the world, and I think Tobalala is somewhere in, I don't know, San Diego, a metro station. So nevertheless, it's a Tobalala network, and here they are developing a new blockchain technology and for the electricity market to make smart home trading. There's another startup together with MBT, and I'm supporting them a bit, which is called Energy, and they want to do this also peer-to-peer trading, where you trade deviations and flexibility. Coming back to the trading, I started with the trading. I would like to finish with the next slide, also with the trading part. The execution of trades is done also today on a blockchain. There is one interesting startup called Enerchain from Ponton, and they are verifying electricity trades in the wholesale market using Tendermint as a blockchain. 40 big utilities are in that project, and it's quite interesting. And I think this is one also of the most interesting business cases. So coming back to the point, what is a blockchain use case and what's a business case? I have a few criteria. Usually, if you started within a company, or also here, you should have small entrance hurdles. So it should become interesting to you, and you shouldn't have big hurdles. You should show short-term results, yeah, and benefits. And that's usually quite good for investors, yeah. And some external marketing effects is also very good. A blockchain use case can be very interesting if you have a digital asset. If you must generate that by measuring that with smart meters, it becomes a bit more complicated. But if you already have a digital asset, I don't know, a certificate is a very interesting digital asset, for example. You need a high level of transparencies between the parties. That's the trust level. Payment of the transaction with digital currencies could be very interesting. And any type of tokenization should be there. Pre-access token, security token, whatsoever token. If you start your use case and have the possibility to have a pre-access token, a pre-sale token, whatsoever, do it. Yeah? Because that's a new hype within the blockchain. And a use case becomes a business case, obviously, if there is a financial benefit. So don't forget that. Usually you should have less costs, or you should have income from customers. Customers are willing to pay you if you reduce their complexity. I've seen a lot of startups within the blockchain case where you really had to start your own Ethereum wallet, and then you had to pay gas. And if you are not in that world, really think about your grandmother using the blockchain. Yeah? So, and it should be scalable by law, by commodities, by countries, whatsoever. So not really having a regional solution which works very well in that region, Be scalable. If not, adapt your use cases and your business cases. Uber, for example, is a very nice example. In each national country, they have a different business case. My last slide. What is really necessary for a potential use case in the energy market, especially in the electricity market? And beside those criteria, I was thinking about to make this really abstract. What is really necessary? Well, at least we must identify things. We must measure stuff somehow. We can do this on the device. As of today's potential, if you want to go into edge, it's something different, but if you want to go into cloud, you must analyze those information. So artificial intelligence, pattern recognition, something like that becomes quite interesting. You should forecast things, because even if we do change the energy market with Industry 4.0, we always have to plan ahead to secure the electricity of supply. So forecasting is a crucial part. You can do that in the cloud too. And then you have to act, because if there's any deviation, you have to act on the trading side, but you also have to act on the device side, change your pitch of the windmill, increase your electricity consumption from the fridge, whatsoever. And that, again, should be on the device. So if your potential cases are around the energy market, think about that. But this is my last slide. And I think I'm almost on time.